studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
In 2008, the cable network AMC took a chance on a television project pitched by X-Files writer Vince Gilligan. It was about a middle-aged chemistry teacher diagnosed with terminal cancer who turned to cooking crystal meth to provide for his family. 5 years and countless awards later, the gamble paid off big time. Breaking Bad is widely considered one of the great dramas in the history of television. This year was nominated for 13 Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Drama. On Sunday, August 11th, Breaking Bad returns to AMC for its final 8 episodes. Here is a teaser for those episodes.
To WW. How do you figure that is? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White?
I'm scared.
Scared of what?
You.
How many more people are gonna die because of us?
No! It's time to tell the truth.
What are you gonna do to stop me? Say my name. Heisenberg. You're damn right.
Joining me now, Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan and 3 of the show's stars and Emmy nominees, Aaron Paul, Anna Gunn, and the man who plays Walter White himself, Bryan Cranston. I am very pleased to have them at this table. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
This is something.
Indeed.
Yeah. Take me back to when you first had the idea for this.
I was coming off of 7 years writing for the TV show The X-Files, and that was a wonderful job. That was a close second as far as great jobs go to Breaking Bad. I think this one has to take the cake. But I was talking to a good buddy of mine, a guy named Tom Schnauz, who I'd gone to NYU Film School with, and he and I had written together on The X-Files. And he and I were bemoaning the fact that we couldn't get another really great TV job. And
life was over.
And life was over. And we talked about being greeters at Walmart, because that was maybe we could be good at that. And he had read an article in the New York Times about some children who had gotten sick from a meth lab that their mother had put in their bathroom. I don't know what the particulars were, but my friend Tom joked in his dark-humored way that maybe we should build our own meth lab in the back of an RV and drive around and make some money on the side while we're in between film jobs. And that's the kind of, you'd have to know him, that's the kind of joking that
we have an idea.
Suddenly this idea goes boom and pops into my head for this character who at that point I did not have a name for, who would do such a thing, a character who became known as Walter White.
Yeah.
But I think really what was going on at the time was that I was about to turn 40 years old. This was back in 2005 or so. And reverse engineering it, looking back in hindsight on it, I think I was really interested in writing a story about a guy having the world's worst midlife crisis, as I was probably about to embark upon my own.
Yeah. And so you had an idea, then you pitched it.
Pitched
and you pitched it as Mr. Chips becomes Scarface.
It's always good to have a nice pithy one-sentence pitch when you go into to talk to the powers that be. And the basic franchise, the basic idea for the show was to take the protagonist and turn him into the antagonist, good guy to bad guy, which seemed somewhat fresh and original and to me. And so the pithy pitch, as it were Mr. Chips and his Scarface. And luckily, it was.
But
purchased.
it didn't sell to everybody. Some people said, for whatever reason, not right for us.
Which is very often the case, to be fair. Pretty much any TV show, any movie you've ever seen that you've loved or hated, most likely had a history behind it of 10 or 20 or 30 people saying no before that one person at the right place at the right time said yes. So.
All right, let me go through the next thing you have to do is casting. Okay, you need a Walt White.
Yeah.
So what was in your mind?
This man right here was in my mind. Honest to goodness, it was. I was very fortunate to have worked with Bryan Cranston in about 1999 on The X-Files. We had a very tricky to-cast character in an episode I had written. It was a two-hander. Agent Mulder had to be riding in a car for 45 minutes straight with a bad guy who was holding a gun to his head and being very nasty and repellent and anti-Semitic and just generally a nauseating character who, nonetheless, when he expired at the end of the hour, the audience needed to feel sympathy for him, to feel sad for his demise. And it was very hard to cast that. It's very easy to find some very scary bad guy actors in Hollywood, but to find the whole package, as it were, to find an actor who could embody the nastiness and yet also have some sort of underlying core of humanity that could show through intermittently as you know, when the moment called for it. Very tricky, and Brian came in. I didn't know him from Adam. I didn't realize I'd already seen him in Saving Private Ryan and From the Earth to the Moon and Seinfeld, and because he's such a chameleon. And he came in and he just nailed it. And as soon as he walked out of the room, I looked at the other producers and said OTW, which is trade speak for off to wardrobe, because you know, I knew we had him. And lo and behold, you know, he was great, and I wanted to work with him in the future. And the moment came.
And the moment came. You got a script.
I got a script from my agency that said, you know Vince Gilligan. He wrote the episode of X-Files that you were in. I go, oh, great. Breaking Bad, I wasn't familiar with the title. I didn't know that it was a colloquialism. And let's just see what this is about. First page. A pair of trousers falling from the sky, bright blue, the red rock hitting the dirt, an out-of-control RV runs over it, interior RV, a man in just tighty-whitey underwear and a respirator drives madly down this road. Next to him, another man is passed out, also in a respirator. He looks behind him, there's two dead bodies sliding up and back in a sea of chemicals and glass. That was page one. I was getting nervous. And then so he got you right away, and I just blasted through the entire script. I was overwhelmed. It was by far the best drama pilot I had ever read, and called my agents right away, and I said, when is this scheduled? And they said, yeah, we have it next Wednesday or Tuesday, something like that. This week. You got to get me in this week, because as actors, I mean, a script like that is like catnip. You know, you start scratching and wanting it and rub up against it and all these things. And I said, I got to get in there, because I know they're going to go after this as soon as they read this. And so I wanted to go in and mark my territory with the man. And so it worked out.
Skyler. Yes. Tell me who she is and how you felt when you first saw the script and what you could do with it.
Well, I had the same feeling as Brian. It gripped me, and I immediately, I had just had my second child 5 months before, and I was sick, and my friend Sharon Bialy, our wonderful casting director, Sharon Bialy and Cherry Thomas, she was trying to get me to come in for it, and I was so tired being a new mom. I had another child as well, and I canceled a couple of appointments, actually, and she called me at home and said, what is wrong with you? And I said, I'm sorry.
That's what you want a friend to do.
That's right. And she said, sit down and read the script right now. And I said, all right. And I got off the phone and I read it. And I closed it and I said, that is by far the best script I think I've ever read in my life. And I called her back and said, I'll be in tomorrow. And so I went in, and I just thought it was extraordinary. And I called Vince, actually, to talk about the character of Skyler, because there wasn't, you know, a huge amount about her in the pilot, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about her. And Vince said to me one line. He said, she will be Carmela Soprano, but she will be in on the crime. And I said, sold.
These are actors' dreams.
That's right.
Yeah. And
That's
the
right.
transformation in character and all that. You know.
Absolutely. And she starts off, you know, in one place, and I knew that she would go to that place, and I thought, I don't know how it will happen, when, where, and I don't care, and I'm in for that ride. And it was a brilliant 5-year ride.
Now, I should explain, Aaron. You did not get the address memo for this interview, did you?
No. I know. I'm so sorry. I was on a phoner and I looked. I do care. And
it's not.
I had a suit.
Is it really?
It's how he rolls. He's Aaron Paul.
He's Aaron Paul.
It was, and I actually had a really nice tie picked out. I apologize.
It wasn't
I love
your
you.
fault. But we're pleased to have you just the way you are.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell me about Jesse, and tell me, you know, a sense of your own connection to this. And
you know, I mean, I'm with everybody else. I mean, when I got Breaking Bad sent to me, I read it, and it was hands down the best. best thing I've ever read. And I went in, my first meeting was with Vince and our, wonderful casting directors. And I had actually done an episode of X-Files years ago. And that's kind of where we first connected. And Tom Snows wrote that particular episode. And so it was very much a warm room walking into this meeting. And in the pilot, I just saw Jesse as kind of just the burnout druggie. I didn't really see much more. And then, obviously, as the series went on, more and more layers were
you were worried at one time you might not make it past year one.
Right. I mean, that was the plan. I think initially we weren't going to have Jesse around. Thank God you changed your mind.
How could I not, with you being you?
Well. So that's what happens. You see how it goes, and characters make their own place, and you say, we can't kill them off.
Absolutely true. Aaron is a prime example of an actor who is just too good to kill off. Not that there was ever an intention to kill off Walter Schuyler in those early years, but it would have been the same story there. It's wonderful in television, this wonderfully collaborative medium, how much the actors bring to it, how much the crew brings to it, from the director of photography on down. The directors, obviously, the writers, all these people get together. And we writers, my 6 writers on the show, the 7 of us together learned about these characters from the actors as much as anything. Layers of complexity, as Aaron just said. Essentially, Jesse was a bit of a druggy burnout and not much more in my initial script. But these layers of complexity get added to the characters in large part once the writers get to know the actors and know who they are and what they're capable of. And in our situation, we're blessed that these actors all have the range of Paganini or whatever. They're just amazing range of abilities.
So we've got a good creator, we've got good scripts, we've got great actors. Yet a series like this has to have something else. What's the something else that's made this a phenomenon? That's made it considered one of the great television dramas. It's made an interesting anti-hero that rivals what happened in The Sopranos with Tony Soprano.
Well, from my standpoint, this has never happened before in the history of television. Usually, television is about stasis, where you come to depend on consistency in a character, and there's comfort in that, and there's room for that. But now, in this, what is, I think, another golden age of television, is that there's much more complexity to these characters, and conflict, and when Vince told me in that first meeting that he wanted to take the character, because in the script it doesn't indicate how long he's going to go on this binge. For all I know, this was it, and he got scared and went back to teaching after that pilot episode. Didn't know. But he told me he wanted to take this character and make a good person into a bad person, completely change the way he operates by the end of the series. And I thought, I don't believe that's ever happened before. Yeah. So he was attempting to make history.
In fact, didn't it? That you sort of keep the character has to have his same identity.
It's a good rule of thumb in television historically that you
suggesting rules ought to be broken.
Well, yes. After how many millions of hours of television we've had since the creation of the medium. Marshall Dillon on Gunsmoke. He's the same Marshall Dillon in season 20 as he is in season 1. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, because you want to know what you're going to get. We all want to know what we're going to get when we're inviting certain characters that we love into our living rooms week after week. But I figured it was there was room in the medium for sort of a new way to take it, a new paradigm, a new opportunity to have a somewhat more finite and limited series. Mm-hmm. Although, admittedly, when it started, I didn't know exactly how long it would go. But when your pitch is, I'm going to take the good guy and turn him into the bad guy, it suggests an A to Z sort of storytelling that then has a finite ending.
This question always comes up, and it's come up with conversation between you and me. When did Walt go bad?
Very good question. Completely open to interpretation. Anyone else's take on it is just as valid as mine. I think we have a little difference of agreement on this, which I like. For my money, it was not in the first episode when he actually dipped his toe into criminality and even, in fact, killed a guy. It wasn't even in the second episode when he killed his second.
Not anybody can kill someone.
Of course. How do you define bad?
That's not bad.
That happens to a lot of people I know.
That was bad. He shouldn't probably. It was a bad idea. But
Kids watching at home, don't accidentally kill someone.
It is bad.
It is bad.
my best answer is episode 4 of our first season, in which Walt is presented with a Deus Ex Machina moment in which former friends of his who are now very rich, just billionaire. We never exactly nailed down what it is precisely that they do, but they're just as brilliant in science as Walt is, and they've gone on to great success, creating a Fortune 500 company. And they find out through Skyler's intervention that Walt is suffering from cancer, and terminal cancer, and in purposefully Deus Ex Machina fashion, they come forth and they say, we are going to pay for the best of care, the best of oncological care. We're gonna get you well. If it's humanly possible, we're going to do this for you. We're going to give you a job. We're going to make you complete and well and whole. And Walt, at the end of the hour, says, thank you very much, but no. And then he goes to Jesse Pinkman, who at that moment he was on the outs with, and he says, let's cook. And that is the moment for me. Yeah.
And he's engaging in full-time participation in criminal activity.
Yeah, because that is the moment to me that puts the lie to, that begins to truly put the lie to this idea that Walter White does what he does. First and foremost, or solely rather, for his family. He's doing it and that's the moment where he truly, for me, and I think for my writers, he truly became interesting. Because before that, it's relatively easy to put a character into a box story-wise and say, well, the old thing about the former special forces guy who's, kids get kidnapped, and so that he'll go kill the president, and he's got to go kill the president to save his kids. Those kind of well-worn, kind of mechanistic or mechanical storytelling tropes are interesting, and they can make for a darn good story. But really, when Walt does what he does for him, that's when I found it more intriguing.
And you think it came earlier?
Oh, yeah. I think in response to that, I would think that had he not already gone down that slippery slope, that he may have accepted their care, but he had already turned to me. Okay. Anytime a person attempts to become someone they're not for financial gain, whether it's altruistic and he's going to take that money and give it to his family, he's still compromising his ethics and morality. And he made a devil of a deal, a Faustian deal, really. And I think it's that first step. It's almost imperceptible because you sympathize with what he's going through, and you wonder, I wonder if I would do the same thing. And so you may not recognize that is the step. He started, and now he can't hide the spiral of descent.
The slippery slope or whatever it is. So tell me about Skyler. I mean, and how did you see what she goes through?
Well, it's been such an interesting journey in terms of my learning about her, because in the beginning, it was hard for me to understand a lot of what was happening with her. We saw a pilot reading in Los Angeles last week, and it was the first time that I had seen the pilot or heard it since, I don't know, probably in 5 years. And I got to have a point of view on Skyler and Walt and the beginning of that relationship that also were almost revelatory to me in that they weren't miserable. They loved each other. Life dealt them curveballs and dealt them things that they weren't prepared for. They thought that life was going to be different. They had a child with special needs. He was working 2 jobs. They're a middle class. You do what you have to do to get by. And they were they were putting their nose to the grindstone and trying to get through. And the way Skyler was trying to get through things she was a very, very practical, strong person. And the way she dealt with life was to try to order and manage and control everything. And she's somebody whose emotions don't come up to the surface. She, I think, is somebody who pushes them down, even to herself. She does not allow them to come up because they're too scary for her. And my backstory that I created with her in terms of the thing with her relationship with Marie is that she and Marie only had each other. Their parents, I think we discussed that as well. They were not around. So Marie and Skylar had each other as sort of war buddies, and Skylar had to be kind of a mother figure to Marie. And so she learned to be in charge very early. And that relationship in the pilot was that kind of relationship. She was in charge in that household. And there is something sort of controlling in that, but it's not in any bad way. She doesn't mean it to be controlling. She's not trying to be mean with it. It's just how she copes. It's how people try to deal with internal turmoil. And so when she gets into the whole thing, when it's revealed that he's cooking drugs, when it's revealed that all these things are going on, she tries to deal with everything by saying, okay, then how do I go into action? She's not somebody who ever sits there and says,
how do I deal with my reality?
That's right. She doesn't sit and cry. She doesn't wring her hands. She says, what do I do? And that's how she moves forward. And I think I loved the fact that Vince made her a woman with a backbone of steel. And it made viewers sometimes really upset. It made them angry. It made her a polarizing figure, and they didn't understand or like her for that sometimes because they felt like she was nagging. They felt like she was getting in the way. They felt like she was getting in the way of. They felt like she was getting.
So I can cook.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a chef. I'm just trying to cook.
So Aaron, the interesting thing about Jesse is that he's a guy who has friends. And he's a guy who develops relationships. I mean, his young friends, then Mike, then Walt. That's the most interesting thing about the character to me.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as he's in constant search of something like guidance and also acceptance. At first, when you meet Jesse, I saw him just as this kind of fumbling idiot, almost like a comic relief in a way. But throughout the show, you see that he didn't come from a battered home. That's not why he is doing what he's doing. I mean, he had he grew up in a nice family, and maybe a little bit too much pressure put on him. His parents gave up on him long ago, and so now he's just floating around, and he just wants. He's desperately in need of guidance, and so he turns to Walt, I think, really as a father figure in a way, and he just wants him to kind of see him as he really is. I mean, he just wants acceptance and love, really, which is just so sad in a way.
How do you explain the fact that Walt is what he is? Yet the audience wants him, if not to win, to succeed.
I don't know that I ever do a good job of explaining it well.
Whether you should. Maybe that should be everybody's interpretation.
Well,
this anti-hero is not Cary Grant, jewel thief.
Yeah, well, that is true. He's not Robin Hood,
right.
And he's not. He is closer.
He's Scarface, as you've said.
He's a little closer to Scarface. I think he's actually. I think Walter White would be scared and a bit repelled by Scarface, as we've seen a more Scarface-like character in our early season, Tuco Salamanca, who Walt was intimidated by, but indeed dealt with, using his brains rather than his brawn. First of all, we were lucky that a wonderful show like The Sopranos paved the way for anti-heroes.
Could this have happened without, and you think, the success of Breaking Bad without the success of The Sopranos?
Somebody had to be first to get anti-heroes out there, but having said that, I don't know that it would have ever been Breaking Bad if we were talking 1999 again, and it was us up at bat first instead of David Chase and his wonderful show. All I know is that they paved the way for, and then certainly the character of Vic Mackey on The Shield, wonderful show, another wonderful anti-hero. I don't know in an alternate reality how it would have worked out, but I guess the pump was primed, as it were, for a time of again, historically, television in the early days, especially when it was more run, aesthetic decisions were made as much by sponsors as by executives and writers. It was a world of white hats and black hats, and the guy wearing the white hat always had to prevail and save the day. And although, if you go back further than that, you'd get your wonderful Warner Brothers film noirs, where you'd have Bogart, or you'd have Jimmy Cagney or Edward G. Robinson playing the bad guy, playing Paul Muni, the original Scarface, but they always had to suffer the consequences of their actions at the end. That was part of the code.
What do you think it is?
I think it's. I think there's a more sophisticated audience now. I think they demand more complexity in their storytelling, and more of a reality. The verisimilitude that he created in setting this foundation, I think it resonated with audiences, that we were presenting a situation and a story that could be real, and that we all are a mixture of good and bad. There is no one, we're always good or always right or always happy. No, we're far more conflicted than that. And I think it tested the audience. And what Breaking Bad has done is not only create a very compelling drama on screen, but it's created conflict within the audience itself.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
As you were mentioning, and saying, yes, and hating your character because she was standing in the way of me cooking crystal meth and putting it out on the street.
Yeah.
And then the audience is going, wait, what am I rooting for?
Exactly, yeah. And not such great rooting for you.
Right. And at first that was just confounding. I thought, I don't understand how they're hating the woman who's saying, hey, husband.
Reservations,
yeah.
You're lying to me. I'm concerned about my family, our family. You're not telling the truth. You're never home. And I need to know what's going on. And they're going, boo! Leave him alone!
Let him be what he wants to be.
Right, exactly. Give the man some freedom, for God's sake, woman. What's wrong with you? You horrible shrew. Yeah.
As it evolved, any surprises for you, as the way it evolved from year to year? Or did you still feel yourself, cast forward, projected forward, once you settled in who your characters were and what made them tick?
I was surprised in that not to keep telling the same story, but in that episode 4 of the first season, I was surprised when Walt told us writers that he wanted to be someone different than we had in mind. Other than that, I'm surprised I'm sitting here on the Charlie Rose Show talking about a show that on paper shouldn't even have succeeded in the first place. It's astounding to me that this show has taken off the way it has.
Astounding.
Astounding. I don't think that's an overstatement. This show on paper, I go out and pitch this thing. I come up with this thing. It's about a 50-year-old man who finds out in the first 15 minutes that he's dying of cancer. 50-year-old man, strike one.
You buy into the idea at the beginning that he is just a regular guy who's trying to make life work, don't you? Or not?
Yeah, he's somewhat depressed.
Yeah.
He's a
kind of a midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis, but he's an honorable man, a family man, a teacher. He wants to spread the joy of his love, chemistry, to a sea of apathetic students, and so you kind of get his depression, and I think people can relate to that.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, the diagnosis of terminal lung cancer, and you go, oh, this poor bastard. And then when he decides to do
he
this
needs a new career,
totally irrational thing,
life.
when he decides to do this totally irrational thing through this set of circumstances, you are kind of going, I get it. I don't know if I would do the same, but I kind of get it.
Location is also a character here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It gives you a place to weave your tale.
It does indeed.
Why Albuquerque?
A location that we arrived at purely for financial reasons.
Well, don't get me wrong.
I love Albuquerque too. I did not know Albuquerque that well. I'd only visited once or twice before. The good folks at Sony came to me once the pilot got ordered by AMC. Thanks to both companies for being so supportive. And they said your money can go farther shooting in New Mexico rather than where you have originally set your pilot, which was Riverside, California, because at that point in time the state of New Mexico was offering a financial incentive. And they said, what's the big deal? You put new license plates on that say California instead of New Mexico, it'll be fine. And I'm glad that they came to us with this idea, but I'm so glad I said, no, let's make it Albuquerque, because the sad truth of it is that, unfortunately, you can't swing a dead cat in this country without hitting a meth lab somewhere or other. I mean, and that's a sad statement. A lot of dead cats. It could be California. It could be, and no one state has the lock on it. Unfortunately, it's a terrible drug, and you find it everywhere. So might as well have been New Mexico, but it turned out to be the perfect place for us because the beautiful skies, the amazing plains that go on forever.
These landscapes, some of these
the landscapes,
giantness of
the Western
West.
quality, the Western. What I think we did for 62 episodes was shoot a postmodern Western, which I'm very proud of.
What does that mean, a postmodern Western?
Postmodern in the sense that it is the American West, but it's a very different American
story.
Well, it's a contemporary story, but it's a West of strip malls and TGI Fridays. But then you get a little away from that, and you still have a man alone on the horizon, facing down his enemies. You've got that with Walter White. You've got a guy finding his way on his own. All these wonderful tropes. This mythic West that I love so much as a viewer.
You directed some episodes?
I did. I directed 3 episodes, and the last one being the first episode of the last season.
Right.
Yeah, and a tremendous amount of work. I think that
I just can't believe it.
It's anybody who direct. We work really hard. But we love it. So it's all about telling the story. And when you read the script and break it, break it down, it's the same advice that Michael Mann gave to you. It's like, where's the story? If you really understand the story, and listen, it'll tell you where to place the cameras. Where do we want to see this scene take place? And that's what I always respond to. And it's wearing a lot of different hats. And but it's wonderful to be able to be the puppeteer. And
yeah, but was it easier for you because you knew the story, you knew everything you could know about the primary character, the main character, and you knew the relationships, you knew everything?
No, the history, the research was
central to this whole thing.
The research was already done. The relationships are already established, not just with the cast, but also the crew, and so you can speak a sort of shorthand.
So what was hard about it, other than you doing 2 things? You're acting and directing.
Yeah, you're overwhelmed with the amount of work. Yeah. And we have a finite amount of time.
He has to do a scene, for example. We have to sit in the middle. We have to do that. The episode you directed where I guess that you're dealing drugs. That was the episode that you directed. So you had to sit there in that scene. We had to do that intense scene. And then in the middle of it, we were staring into each other's eyes. And then you said, oh right. Cut. And then you have to go and check the monitor and check a million things, and everybody's coming to you and asking the questions, and you have to be the one to answer them, and then you have to go back and go into the scene again. And I remember you asking me, saying, how did that scene go? Was that, and you have to check in and actually get answers so that you can, understand.
You do. I mean, I depended heavily on them. I go to them and say, how did you feel about that? Did you feel you wanted to come?
Between the relationship between the two of you, was a bit of a Macbeth there?
I did, yeah.
And how so?
I felt that as things went on, there was a little bit of that going on between the two of us, and that it got to the point where there was a power play, there was a power struggle, and there was also just this deal that had been struck between us, and it became that Shakespearean. There was something about it that it really resonated that way for me between those 2 characters.
What was so great about the whole concept is that everyone's morality was compromised. When a push came to shove, she had to decide, as Skyler, am I in or am I out? Yeah. And she decided to go in, which was a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah. And they had to do it, and that was very hard for you to, as you say, for you and the writers, to figure out how to get Skylar into
Well,
it.
and again, to the organic nature of storytelling, and something you mentioned last night, we wanted to forestall Skylar's understanding of Walt's extracurricular activities as long as possible. At the beginning of season 2, was that when it was? Or was the end of season 2?
End of
season 2. We wanted to go another season or 2 without Skylar, with Skylar still in the dark. And we just looked at each other in the writer's room. We said, this character of Skylar is too smart. The actress playing her is too smart. It will not wash if we go yet another season. So we changed we did a 180, and suddenly suddenly it's like Skylar knows everything.
Yeah. And it makes it a lot more interesting then.
Yeah.
Makes it scary in the writer's room, but much more interesting story-wise. Yeah.
Let's talk about the final episode by not talking about it.
Sure.
So what was in your mind? I mean, what were the sort of avoid this, do this, any of that kind of thing?
Be satisfying. Satisfy the audience. Have an ending that feels correct, that feels fitting. And Charlie, I got to tell you, this past year and a half worrying about this ending is just taking years off my life.
Oh yeah, because we remember the ending of so many great things, whether it's MASH or whether it's Mary Tyler Moore or whether it's on television or whether it's obviously Sopranos, but everything else. I mean,
and conversely, we remember.
How do you bring everything together for the,
We spent. My 6 writers and myself just spent hour upon hour enclosed in our writers' room, asking ourselves the same basic questions over and over again. What do the characters want? And that's the most organic and proper.
See, that's a
question.
fascinating question. What do the characters want? Yeah.
You know what it really comes down to? If you, and you know it when you're doing it, if you say, oh, we've got this great idea for a scene, I don't know how to get Walter White there because he wouldn't do the things one would need to do to get there. But you know what? We'll just start driving some square pegs into round holes. We'll make the character get to where we need him to get. And I'm not saying we never had great scenes that we desperately tried to work toward, but that's an inorganic way to tell stories, and it feels wrong on the few occasions we did it. And the best kind of storytelling, conversely, it seems to me, is when you say to yourself over and over again, what does Walter White want right at this minute? What does Skylar want? What does Jesse Pinkman want? What are they afraid of? What's the obstacle?
You know where I'm going. Yeah. What does Walter White want?
He got to a point where he wanted it all. Yeah. He was seduced.
I'm really asking not as what he do on the final episode, but what does he want by year 5?
He wants to be alive. Even if that means he's going to be dead in a month or 2, during that period he was alive. This course of 2 years that the show takes, he was a walking dead man before. He was depressed and he missed opportunities, and now he is, at the very least, you can say he's feeling everything. He was seduced by power and the aphrodisiac of money and intimidation and all these things that make the chest come out and you stand up straight, and it's very seductive for a man, and that's what he felt.
It's seductive for anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody, but
whatever the variation is, without going into criminality, but it's seductive. The idea that I matter and I'm relevant and I somehow have power and respected.
Even if it's cloaked, the word on the street is whoever's making this, whoever Heisenberg is, it's the best ever, and he would be able to get some satisfaction in that.
Some say, Aaron, that you look at Vince and you hear him talk. It sounds like the nicest guy, a mild-mannered guy, yet he has in his mind, and the writers that joined him on this journey, this is dark stuff.
Yeah.
There's it's incredible. I mean, everyone that meets Vince or has the privilege of working with Vince will say he's the nicest guy that you ever have worked with. But there's something brewing deep inside.
Yeah, what do you think it is?
I'm not sure. We all have our little secrets.
Have we discussed this before?
He's just so he's just a mad genius. He really, he really is.
Interestingly enough, I think that microcosm is where Walter White is that we're all not all kind and we're not all vicious. Is that just like Vince himself? It's a walking example of the types and the range, the spectrum of emotions that we all have, and we're all capable of being kind and we're all capable of being dangerous given the right set of circumstances.
And we can feel humanity and also rage and jealousy and all the things to wish others not well. What do you think? Same thing?
Same thing. I think the fact that you explored the duality of that in all these characters in such detail and with such complexity is what makes people so fascinated with it. I think that is what draws them in more than anything. I know people get drawn into the show for various reasons. There are different things that people really love about the show.
Story or character or all the things.
But I think it's really that it reveals so much about human nature in a very authentic way that hasn't been done before in this way. And so you have this incredibly polite Southern gentleman, but you have a really twisted sense of humor and all that other stuff. It's really
just like most Southern gentlemen. Not mentioning me.
No. I'm glad you wouldn't go there. So. I can't ask this. I'm trying to stay away from the final, but I'm fascinated by where Jesse might be going. You know, I mean, if up to the seasons we've seen before. This is without getting into what actually happens. I mean, you can see Jesse finding some kind of really interesting life.
One would hope.
He's gone through a range of emotions. He has a bit of money if he hasn't given it all away.
Yeah. And money clearly does not drive this character. Just clearly.
His friendship. I mean, he keeps going back and hanging out with his buddies.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You want to just hug this guy. You just want to protect him. You want Jesse Pinkman to go right off into the sunset.
And unlike this guy, you can see where he was saying himself, especially the killing of the young kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be part of this.
No.
Walt never felt that, did he, or not? Walt, he just accepted it as necessary.
Yeah.
Or once it happened.
Collateral damage, I think, is probably how he would see it. Is unnecessary, unfortunate, as opposed to unnecessary. If it's necessary, he has to do what he has to do.
But this guy, it turns him upside down.
As I think it would most of us.
Where is he?
He's just easily manipulated. Walter White just knows how to just be the master puppeteer, and Jesse is just on one of his many strings, and Jesse he doesn't want to accept that this guy that he's so close to is that evil. He really doesn't want to accept that, but now we're at a point at the end of last season, he knows that he is that evil. I mean, he is. And look at you. He wants to have nothing to do with him. He wants to stay away from him as far as possible. Yeah.
What also fascinated me about this is there are moments in which you writers got yourself in trouble. We've talked before about when you got inside that wreck and Hank is outside and you don't know how you're going to get out of this, and the writers don't know how they're going to get you out of there either.
It's just fantastic.
I know.
That's the goal of the writers is to write themselves into a corner. I think Peter Gould mentioned this, that it's always great to be forced into a corner by your characters, and listen to them and talk about them and figure out how to get out. And what's so interesting about it is that we have been living with these characters for 6 years, and still, to the very last episode, we're constantly being surprised by reading it. You'd think that we would see it coming.
Yeah.
You'd think we would see things coming, but it's like, oh, did you read that? Oh my God! It's like, it's a wonderful gift.
Yeah. There's also the scene in which Hank is sitting on the toilet, and he sees leaves of grass or whatever the book was.
Yes, exactly.
Leaves of grass. I mean, just as a moment, since it's already played, why discover that there?
I guess to subvert expectations is the best answer.
Surprise.
Yeah, this is a man who's clearly very good at his job, sometimes, I hear anecdotally from certain quarters that Hank gets a bad rap for not seeing what's directly under his nose. But I say in real life, most of us don't see what's under our nose. I wouldn't expect, if I found out my brother was a master criminal, I would be very surprised indeed if my brother Patrick was suddenly a really bad guy. It's one of these.
There's just no way.
No way he could. Yeah. But so as far as this is a man who's very good at his job, Hank is, and. You ask yourself quite often. You ask yourself in the writers' room, what's the typical way of doing this? The typical way is for it to happen in the squad room or the DEA bullpen or whatever. Hey, we've got this information. Wait a minute, these two pieces line up. It just seemed to subvert expectations, to have it come at a moment where life is good. It looks like there's going to be a happy ending. And the scene of that episode written by one of my writers, Moira Wally Beckett, there's this prolonged outdoor cookout that they're having in the backyard of the White House, as we call it, by the pool, and it goes on, and it seems to be amounting to nothing. And what we hope is that you're at home saying, I know this is the last episode I'm going to see for over a year. I'm looking at my watch. It's a happy ending. What the hell kind of ending is this for a season of Breaking Bad? And we stretched it out as long as we humanly could. Walt goes into the bathroom to do what needs to be. Hank, I'm sorry, goes to the bathroom to do what needs to be.
And he finds Walt there.
And all of a sudden, boom, everything turns.
In terms of the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, but you gave that hint early without it being a hint. Did you know when you gave that hint that you wouldn't come back to it? I mean, had you seen that far and connected that way?
The hint as in...
the book had been mentioned. Walt had been asked about it, and he said Walt Whitman.
Yes.
And he got away with it when questioned by Hank. And now, the realization. So when you planted that scene early, did you know in end of episode 4, or year 4, it would be the thing that set off year 5? When
we first mentioned Leaves of Grass, it was a bit of a throwaway. We had a wonderful character named Gail Bedecker.
Yeah, right.
Played by the
New York actor who would come out and...
Excellent actor named David Constable. Right. And I just like the idea that this character of Gail Bedecker, who was Walt's new meth cooking partner, who was the antithesis of Jesse, who knew chemistry inside and out, and could quote Walt Whitman by memory. This wonderful... Whitman poem that I loved in high school when I heard The Learned Astronomer. And that was a bit of a throwaway in that episode, but then we realized Walt Whitman, Walter White, W.W., and it dawned on us a few episodes later that maybe we could make hay from that, make fictional and construct something that will ultimately lead to Hank's.
And teed up year 5.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that we get a lot of credit for playing a very deep game, and we try to play as deep a game as possible as far as figuring out well in advance where things are going. But I think the thing my writers and I did best was mine our history. In other words, go back and say, what can we make use of? What I's can we dot? What T's can we cross? What loose ends can we tie up? And make it look like we had this thing planned out all along. Make ourselves look like we're really good at this, when in fact we're just good. We're good keepers of our own history.
How has this changed your life and career?
I mean, it's. I tell this man, at least try to tell this man 42 times a day how he gave me a career. I mean, he just has opened up so many doors, and for 6 years. Telling this story and living and breathing as Jesse Pinkman, and just the writing is just so perfect, and I've just learned so much from this man. I mean, to be able to work opposite Bryan Cranston every single day, I've grown so much as an actor, and I'm getting kind of emotional right now because it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I know I will never experience anything like this again, and it's just so rough to kind of say goodbye to it. I mean, just it's all downhill from here.
No, it's not.
Which is no. I say that with
in terms of the experience, you can't imagine having this kind of experience.
And I don't say that in a bad way, but
you'd think you'd be able to afford a suit.
Yeah, you would. I know. I was wondering why.
I've been thinking about that this entire time.
But you don't think it was a sign of disrespect for me? What?
I can't say. I can't speak to that.
They had the nicest suits picked out.
I know. God, I was hoping it would be. And a nice tie.
You would have loved the tie is perfect. Yeah.
And how did this change? And I mean, just the sense of, not only in terms of what career opportunities, but just a sense of, being a...
Everything. It changed my life. It changed my career. It gave me... it's like working with... I say that acting with Brian is like playing tennis with a pro tennis player. You hit the ball across the net, and then it comes back a different way every time, with a different spin, and it makes you better. It makes you better every time, and it was a joy to go to work every day, and it was such a joy that it didn't feel like work. Actually, it felt like playing with my friends, and it felt like making art. And honestly, I've done a lot of TV, and I did another great TV show before this, Deadwood, with David Milch. But this honestly felt like playing and making art with my friends, and it was extraordinary. And it's changed me as an actress as well, and made me a better actress, because that role was challenging. It was a challenging role, and I really thank you for that challenging role. I thank you, because I really admired Skylar, and it was difficult at times for me to stick with it, to really understand her myself at times. But I'm so happy that I got that challenge, and that I had the opportunity. It's done everything for me.
I actually know what it's done for you. It's made you a magazine cover boy. That's exactly what it's done for you.
Yes. Popular Mechanics to GQ.
But sum it up for me, for some sense of, for you, who everybody knew you had all the things that they are in awe of, but a much larger community got to feel over a period of 5 years what acting is about.
Yeah, it's I realize that I'm just embracing this entire experience with alacrity and gratitude. To be able to have this opportunity to perform at this level with this level of material is a gift that we will never ever forget. And in the company of such talented artists as I was fortunate to work with, we knew that we were very lucky, and we all knew that, and to the person, that we love this art form and we love to perform. So we look forward to Mondays as opposed to, and here comes another Monday. So we look forward to those days we get in and you can take a bite out of something. And that includes the intimacies and the frustration that is inherent in the work as well, and the joy of a scene well played, and the entire experience is too large to be able to give it its just due. It's changed all of our lives for the better, and we owe it all to Vince Gilligan.
We do.
Go on.
That's true.
All right, I'll go on.
That's true.
When Vince was a boy.
Growing up in Farmville.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you here. August 11th will be the first episode. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.